Afternoon. National Assembly for Wales is now in session, and the first item this afternoon, questions to the First Minister. And question 1 is Peter Black.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Will the First Minister make a statement on the standard of care in hospitals in the ABMU area?
Well, the vast majority of care provided in the hospitals in the ABMU area is of high quality, but appropriate action is being taken where specific concerns have been raised. I'm aware of those concerns.
Well, thank you for that answer, First Minister. Can I concur with you that the vast majority of care is of a high standard? However, as you say, specific allegations were raised, and I'm told were raised with you back in June 2012 and confirmed by ABMU in autumn 2012. However, the review which you've now put underway has only come about in October, November 2013. Can I ask why there was such a delay between you being made aware of these allegations and that review being set in motion? And can you guarantee that the many complaints which are now coming forward, not least at the public meeting on the 30th of January, will be dealt with by that review?
I think you're referring to matters which came to me as a constituency member and not as First Minister. I can inform the member that after the 5th of July of last year, I received no direct communication on this matter. Nevertheless, I know that the Health Minister made his announcement with regard to a review, as he will be aware. And indeed, I will be meeting, although not as First Minister, a number of those concerned on Saturday.
Susie Davis.
Diolch Llywydd. First Minister, while I support ABMU's own inquiries and reviews, they do have to pay for them from their own limited funds, and of course they can be ignored by other local health boards because of their limited funds. Should individual health boards bear the costs of an inquiry, of individual inquiries, when actually a national inquiry for concerns expressed across Wales could be met by a Keogh-style inquiry paid for by government?
Well, no, I mean, where local health boards decide they wish to instigate an independent review, then it's a matter for them, of course, to pay for that review. It wouldn't be a matter for government to pay for it. Nevertheless, I am glad to see that such a review has been set up by ABMU, and a number of actions have been taken to try to address the concerns that have been raised.
Bethan Jenkins.
First Minister, in an open letter sent to you by the family of Lillian Williams on February the 4th, it makes mention of an email sent to you by the family in June 2012, suggesting it clearly alerted you to issues at the hospital over 18 months ago. I heard what you said to Peter Black in terms of the fact that you believe that those emails were sent to you as a constituency AM, but do you not believe that in the interest of transparency that those emails should be now made public?
You can see them if you want. They were sent to me as a constituency AM. I have a full list of the emails that were sent and their content. I have no difficulty in sharing them. But of course, I want to get the permission of the sender before doing that. But I can say that if you're referring to Mr. Gareth Williams, I saw him on a number of occasions. He sent me an email at the beginning of July 2013 thanking me for the help that I had rendered as an Assembly member. At that point, he was taking legal advice from solicitors, and I heard nothing direct from him after that point.
Question 2, Lindsay Whittle.
Diolch Llywydd. What measures is the Welsh Government taking to increase the number of credit unions in Wales, please?
Well, there are currently 21 credit unions in Wales, providing all Wales coverage to more than 72,500 members. We continue to provide funding to credit unions and are keen to see membership continue to increase across these established credit unions.
Thank you for your answer, First Minister. First Minister, it was noted last year that part of the problem was that in Wales we expect credit unions to do too much as a social enterprise. The fact is, though, that credit unions will not be able to provide a mass service to people in Wales unless they widely expand their client base beyond the higher risk small value lending. What are you doing to help expand credit union customer bases to a larger audience and follow the example of our neighbours in Ireland who are now able to offer loans to set up small businesses?
Well, of course, the credit unions in Ireland have been in place for many, many more years than in Wales, and they've been able to build up their reserves to a level that we have not yet been able to do. What I can say, however, since October of 2010, just over £4 million has been provided jointly by ourselves and the ERDF for the Access to Financial Services through Credit Unions project. And that project has helped more than 23,000 adults throughout Wales who meet the definition of being financially excluded.
Anne Jones.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, I'm pleased that the focus from this Welsh Government has been to support credit unions. And I know from certainly in my own area the excellent work that the credit unions are doing and helping particularly young savers. But the situation, however, is still that payday lenders are still able to advertise in a way that credit unions aren't able to do that, and therefore there's not a level playing field. What more can this government do to ensure that credit unions are put on a level playing field, and so that they can operate as they rightly should do as a high street bank?
Well, these, of course, are matters outside of the competence of the government or indeed the Assembly. But I've no doubt at all that as we see credit unions grow in the future, the pressure will come, and it's pressure that we would support to make sure they are able to deliver a wider range of services than is the case now. Important, however, of course, that they're able to show that they are financially self-sustaining before they move on to offering new products.
Mark Isherwood.
Thank you. Although local independent credit unions like the All Fincher Credit Union play a vital role, we heard at the recent North Wales Credit Union AGM that they had to come together through merger and amalgamation to deliver sustainability, broaden customer base and range of services. What discussions, therefore, has the Welsh Government had with the Association of British Credit Unions Limited, to which North Wales Credit Union belongs, and most of the others, regarding perhaps driving forward a fewer number of credit unions, but larger, with broader reach, through voluntary mergers and amalgamations?
I think it's important that such a process is considered by credit unions as part of the process to making them more self-sustainable. We could not be in a situation in years to come where credit unions need revenue funding on, or need substantial capital funding on a regular basis. And so it's important that where such mergers of credit unions can take place, in order to put credit unions on a firmer footing, that they are examined very closely by those credit unions.
William Powell.
First Minister, in my region of Mid and West Wales, credit unions have built their membership in part through the development of payroll deduction schemes, which have proved particularly popular in the public sector, both in county councils and local health boards. Given the advantages that accrue to people across Wales from such deduction schemes, what is your government prepared to do to further support credit unions in rolling this out, particularly to those who work in the private sector?
Well, as I said, we have funded ourselves in ERDF the Access to Financial Services project, which has helped, of course, 23,000 people in terms of being able to access credit. And where any viable schemes come to our attention in the future, we will, of course, look to see what financial support that we can give them. I can say, of course, that the assets of Welsh credit unions have continued to grow. In 2000, they were at 4 million. They're now at, or rather, as of September last year, they are at 34 million. So we know that the credit unions are performing a very useful and invaluable function for so many people.
We now move to questions from the party leaders, and first this afternoon, Leader of the Opposition, Andrew Archie-Davis.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, your government has announced today another £50 million for the health service, obviously reinforcing our calls for additional resource for the NHS. Do you think this is not yet another bailout? I hear that your front bench laughing at that, but why have you made £50 million extra available today? Is it not yet another bailout for the Welsh NHS?
Well, I'm surprised that the Leader of the Opposition does not welcome more money for health. The reality is because it's not on his terms, he does not welcome it. We will continue, of course, to ensure that the Welsh service is properly funded in the future.
Well, far from it. I mean, at the end of the day, if you'd listened to us at the start, it wouldn't require these interventions and it wouldn't require these bailouts. And the managers and the staff, the clinicians, could actually plan procedures that would get rid of the waiting lists that are going up under your premiership. What I would say to you, First Minister, is another point that we've been pushing on is a Keogh-style inquiry and the concerns that people, and the genuine concerns that people have over care in our hospitals. It is fair to say that the majority, the vast majority, have a very positive experience. But you see it in your own hospital, First Minister, that time and time again, relatives are coming forward and identifying a failure in the care that their relatives have had at hospitals across Wales. Will you not now commit to undertaking a Keogh-style inquiry that will look independently at many of the proposals that have come out of England and see whether there are scope to introduce them here in Wales?
Well, the reason why there was such an inquiry in England is because things were far, far worse in England. It's right to say, of course, that there have been issues raised, and I'm aware of those issues. And the concerns that families have expressed need to be investigated. That much is true, but as he has said himself, the vast majority of people in the Welsh NHS have a very good standard of care. We know the patient surveys suggest that satisfaction rates are close to 90%. That is not the basis for a wide-scale public inquiry. And he asked why we didn't listen to him. Well, if we listened to him, we'd see 20% cuts in education. Oh. We'd see 30% cuts in the programme to... oh, he says 10% now. 10% apparently. 30% cut in terms of economic spending, we know that. A 20% cut in local government spending, with the concomitant effect, of course, on the council tax. So no, I'm sure there are very many taxpayers in Wales who are very glad we didn't take his advice.
No, First Minister, I said 12% because last week it was 12% that you said, and this week we're going to 20% we are. But I go back to the point that I make.
Order.
About a significant minority of relatives and patients are highlighting real concerns of the experience they have in our hospital. An FOI to your government by our party indicated, and this is from your own FOI team, that to just go through the complaints that the Department of Health and Social Care receive or the Director General's office receive would take 16,683 hours to answer. Good. They are receiving 63 emails a day on this particular issue. So I accept the point you make, First Minister, and it is a credit to our clinicians that most people have a very positive experience in our NHS. But you cannot get away from the fact that there are a significant minority who are not enjoying that positive experience, and an independent inquiry looking at the whole of the Welsh NHS would be the best way to address the issues that I've highlighted to you today.
Well, I simply don't accept what he has to say. He argues against himself now, and he's done that on 2 occasions. That is, the vast majority of people get excellent treatment most of the time. That much is true. Patients say that. He doesn't deny that. I give him credit for that. But it is right to say that complaints have been made, and I'm aware of the complaints with regard to my own hospital, and those complaints must be fully investigated. Nobody could possibly argue against that. It's important that the LHB does that. And as I say, I'll be meeting my constituents with a view to looking at the situation regarding their position. I have to say, of course, that I welcome the fact that ABMU has a new Director of Planning at the Princess of Wales Hospital. I welcome the fact they have commissioned an independent review, and that review must, of course, be allowed to take its course in order to provide the right level of evidence so that the local health board actually takes action. There are some in this chamber who call for a public inquiry at the drop of a hat. We have to remember that as far as a public inquiry is concerned, there is the cost of probably £1 million, but also the fact that these families want answers quickly. A public inquiry would take 2 years, minimum, to come up with those answers. I believe in order... Well, I hear laughter from the applied benches. I know that because they know nothing about such things. The reality of the situation is that these families want to have answers quickly, and I want to make sure that the review process that has been put in place provides those answers quickly, whereas a public inquiry would take some years to provide them with answers. And I believe they want those answers as quickly as possible.
We now move to Leader of Plaid Cymru, Leanne Wood.
Diolch Llywydd. First Minister, the weather is in the headlines again. Many of our communities are still struggling following previous weather events. Now, the Minister for Natural Resources has said that his officials are liaising with European officials to explore the use of European funds to help address the immediate needs of affected communities. Can you please tell us what progress has been made in this respect?
A letter has been sent to Owen Patterson, and the letter says 2 things. Firstly, if there's to be a consequential in terms of extra money for funding in England, then we would expect to see a slice of that consequential, of course. And secondly, we have asked that they consider making an application, because it has to be the UK, to the European Solidarity Fund for those areas that have suffered from flooding.
Thank you for that answer, First Minister. Now, in relation to the current weather events, the Chief Scientist at the Met Office has said, and I quote, "All the evidence suggests there is a link to climate change." Do you accept that there's a link with climate change and the conditions that we've seen weather-wise recently? And do you also accept that these conditions are likely to get worse?
That is what the science is telling us. I have no reason to doubt that. It's quite clear to me that climate change is happening and that it is influenced by the way in which we live our lives. That strikes me that the overwhelming evidence, overwhelming scientific evidence supports that conclusion.
The BBC highlights today a report that says £135 million needs to be spent every year just to maintain current flood defences. The Minister for Natural Resources has said that a managed retreat from coastal areas is not currently government policy, but he's also previously said that the government cannot simply protect the whole coast as it is today. Given that this is a contradiction, perhaps you can provide some clarity on this question, First Minister. Are you or are you not actively considering the managed retreat from coastal areas as government policy?
No, she will know that this is not our current thinking. There is a shoreline management plan, which I'm sure she is aware of, that deals with this issue, but it also highlights the challenges there are in terms of defending our communities against extreme weather events. Although I would say, of course, that even though our weather has been very similar in Wales, because of the investment we have put in terms of dealing with flood defences, we have not seen the devastation that England has seen. That's because, of course, in England they cut flood defence budgets, and now we see an unseemly row between the Environment Agency and government. In Wales, we have simply got on with protecting communities.
And finally, we move to Leader of the Welsh Liberal Democrats, Kirsty Williams.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. First Minister, last year, following the publication of another very disappointing set of education PISA results, I asked you when we would expect to see improvement, and you gave me a list, a long list: the National Literacy and Numeracy Programme, the National Support Programme, Supporting Professional Development Programme, Teach First Wales, Leadership Development, Strengthening Accountability, Learning Wales, a national model for the regional working, and dealing with attendance and behaviour. But despite all of that, you went on to say that it would take a little bit more time before these improvements had their full force. In the last 2 weeks, we've seen the announcements of yet 2 more initiatives from your government: the Central South Wales Challenge and now the Schools Challenge. Why should the pupils and parents of Wales have any more faith in these initiatives than any of the others that you have previously announced and over the years of your government's failure to tackle educational standards in Wales? Well,
we see the gap in terms of GCSE achievement is closing, and we expect that trend to continue in the future. I wonder if she will welcome Schools Challenge Cymraeg as a project. We wanted to make sure that we get more consistency in the education system in Wales, because we have some very good schools, but we have some schools that are in need of improvement. That's why we introduced Schools Challenge Wales, and I'm sure she will join me in welcoming that initiative.
First Minister, what I would welcome is an improvement in educational standards in schools across Wales, and a programme that will actually deliver it. Now, Schools Challenge is, of course, based on a model that was launched in England over a decade ago. A Labour government taking programmes forward to improve educational attainment. But in that decade, a whole cohort of Welsh children have gone through the Welsh education system and have missed out. Is this not yet more evidence of what you described in your own words as taking your eye off the ball?
I welcome the Liberal Democrat praising another Labour initiative, although she can't bring herself, of course, to support it. I noticed that the Conservative Party did, and indeed I believe Plaid Cymru did as well, but she can't do that, it seems. I don't accept that a whole cohort of Welsh children are somehow missed out, because we have some very good schools, and we know today one excellent local education authority. What we don't have is consistency. What we don't have is consistency, and that's why Schools Challenge Cymru is so important in making sure that those who are at the moment at the bottom are brought up to the kind of standard that people expect and should want to see. That's why we introduced that programme. But there's no getting away from the fact that if we continue with this situation, we have 22 local education authorities where 6 are in special measures, we will never see the improvements in education that we will want to see in the future. And so that has to be tackled, as well as moving forward, of course, with those initiatives we've already announced.
Can I just say, this is not Simon Thomas's question time. Could we just... Order, please. Will you listen carefully to what the Leader of the Welsh Liberal Democrats can ask in a final question? Kirsty Williams.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. First Minister, that's one excellent LEA out of 22. Surely even you with your brass neck cannot be proud of that record. Now, last month, your Minister promised a clear way forward for Welsh schools. And the school's challenge statement that he put out yesterday suggested that challenge schools will be, and I quote, identified as underperforming as measured by banding and a range of deprivation-related factors. But recently it emerged that school banding will be supplemented by a new National School Improvement and Categorisation System, and that's in addition to the ESTING categorisations we also have. It now appears, rather than a clear way forward, we have three methods of ranking and categorising schools. Could you explain to Welsh parents which of these three methods of rating and categorisation will be used for choosing the schools in the Challenge programme, and when can we expect to see those schools actually named and announced?
By May. And why shouldn't parents have the ability to compare schools? I think that's absolutely right. And she makes the point. We have one excellent LEA amongst 22. Quite right. Quite right. That's a good point to make. And 6 of them in special measures. No, we don't run the local authorities. Well, here's a question for her then. Here's a question for her. Local education authorities, 6 of them have failed. The current 22 authorities were set up by the Conservatives in the mid-90s. It is the case that those local authorities are not providing consistent education. So here is the point I want to make to her. What is the most important to her? The education of children or STV? Will she support the reorganisation of local government and the strengthening of education, or is a voting system more important to her than the education of our children?
We now move back to questions on the paper without help from the background. And question 3 is Andrew Archie-Davis.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, what is the Welsh Government doing to help employment in South Wales Central?
Well, it's encouraging new employment continues to be a key priority for us, and we will deliver through our continued support for businesses and entrepreneurs.
Thank you, First Minister. One of the key things is to advertise what South Wales Central has, in particular to employers to come and locate. We have 2 enterprise zones, for example. Recently, I had the pleasure of taking the KLM flight out of Cardiff Airport over to Schiphol. There was not one single advertisement there for the 2/3 of the passengers on that plane who are related to business, I would suggest, to see what the positive news Wales could offer to them if they chose to come and locate in Wales. Not one, not in the in-flight journal, not in advertising at the airport terminal or anything. Can you please look into this, First Minister, to make sure that that offer is addressed, because we are losing a captive audience and we're losing the opportunity to promote what South Wales Central has to offer future employers?
There are adverts at the airport. I don't know whether he came back through international arrivals, but if he had, he would have noticed there's a substantial amount of promotion of Wales for those arriving in Wales. In terms of tourism, in terms of the showcasing of Welsh produce, in terms of promoting Wales as a business destination. I don't know if he did that, but certainly if he has the opportunity, I'd encourage him to see what's been done there as well.
Mick Anthony? No? Julie Morgan, then.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Will the First Minister join me in welcoming the reports that the International Baccalaureate Organisation is about to sign a lease for 48,500 square foot office in Cardiff Gate in my Cardiff North constituency, thereby securing 300 highly skilled jobs that would have been lost had the IBO carried through with the announcement that it made 5 years ago, I think, that it was quitting Cardiff for Amsterdam, that these jobs are now secured here and expanding.
I very much welcome the fact that the IB is staying. I have to declare that some 20 years ago my wife worked for the International Baccalaureate, so I'm familiar with the organisation, but it's important for Wales that a major educational organisation wants to remain in Wales and, of course, commit itself in the way that it has. And I welcome that very much.
Leanne Wood.
First Minister, Plaid Cymru continues to work on plans to create new jobs, and that has been a priority throughout my leadership of the party. We're also committed to safeguarding jobs, which is why this morning I visited Cardiff Docks along with Jill Evans MEP as part of our European election campaign launch. Now, Cardiff Docks welcomes ships from throughout the EU on a daily basis, and it helps to demonstrate why it's of benefit for Wales to be an integral part of the European Union. We accept that a lot needs to change within the EU, but given that 150,000 Welsh jobs in over 500 companies depend on our access to the EU single market, and that 43% of exports went to the EU last year, Will you join with me and the Party of Wales in affirming the importance of EU membership to the Welsh economy?
I will, of course, but I have to say that I've lost count of the number of times that something I say is repeated back at me 3 weeks later by Plaid Cymru. Because the 150,000 jobs is something that I have used, and certainly she and I are on the same page in terms of membership of the EU. It is the reality that we have so many jobs in Wales, 150,000 of them that are reliant on our EU membership. It's a major export market, £260 million worth of EU subsidies goes to our farmers. Our farmers would not exist without membership of the EU. They would not be able to access a substantial market. They would not receive £260 million worth of subsidy. That is the reality of it. We would see a number of large companies who I believe in the longer term would leave Wales and go closer to the EU market, which is not far off 10 times the size of the UK market. And it is already the case, I'm afraid, that we have had investors who are questioning whether to come to Wales or indeed the UK because of the uncertainty over EU membership. Because it's access to that market of 500 million that is the most important thing for so many investors.
Elena Parrott.
First Minister, last summer the Welsh Government speculatively bought one capital quarter in Cardiff's enterprise zone for £15 million. As that building now nears completion, when do you anticipate being able to recoup a return on that investment? And how many jobs would you expect to see created at that location?
Well, of course, we're looking to see jobs created at all enterprise zones. Some, of course, are more advanced than others, particularly D-side. Others, like Snowdonia, are a little behind in terms of job creation because of their geography, but there are indeed exciting plans for Snowdonia as well, and I expect to see all the enterprise zones delivering a substantial number of jobs, both provided and safeguarded in the future, certainly better than the performance has been in England.
My geography is not very good, but I didn't think Snowdonia was actually in South Wales Central.
I didn't hear the question if I'm all of it was enterprise zones, I'm afraid, Presiding Officer.
Question 4, Janet Finch-Saunders.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Will the First Minister make a statement on the recent Wales audit reports regarding unlawful payments in Carmarthenshire and Pembrokeshire County Councils?
I welcome the publication of the reports, and of course it's important that those councils deal with those reports with the utmost seriousness.
Thank you. I'm glad, First Minister, that you mentioned serious, because as regards Pembrokeshire, the Council failed to have the regard to the public sector equality duty. The decision constituted indirect discrimination. Senior officers who had a disqualifying personal and pecuniary interest in the decision participated in the decision-making process. Carmarthenshire, the report was drafted and presented by a senior officer who had a disqualifying personal and pecuniary interest. In addition, the Executive Board is
coming to
also
the question?
unlawful. First Minister, those are pretty serious findings and a total lack of corporate governance within our local authorities. And I can tell you, this has cast shockwaves now, not just across Carmarthenshire and Pembrokeshire, but within my own local authority and authorities in North Wales, where they actually do practice good governance. There are calls for the Chief Executive to be sacked. There are calls
No, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Either ask the question now or you sit down.
First Minister, will you show strong leadership as opposed to your Minister for Local Government and actually support the calls for some real action on this, so that we can actually restore public confidence in our local authorities?
Yes, we will show strong leadership. It's inappropriate that councils are paying as they are. We also was in the Western Mail this morning. I am not angling for a pay rise, but I suspect that people will be surprised to see the Chief Executive of Pembrokeshire earns £65,000 a year more than the First Minister of Wales. I think that's very difficult for them to justify. I think there are serious questions that councils have to answer in terms of the way that they have paid senior officers. And as a government, we will give further consideration to what needs to be done in order to restore public confidence.
Roger Glyn Thomas.
Dwi'n falch, Prif Wydog, bod chi'n cydnabod bod canfyddiadau ar archwilydd yn eithriadol o bwysig. Yn gyd-destun Caerfyrddin, nwch chi gytuno gyda fi hefyd, i bod hi'n gwbl anerbyniol i'r cyngor sir herio awdurdod ar archwilydd a'i adroddiad. Y dylen nhw yn sicr dderbyn y canfyddiadau hynny a gweithrediad nhw'n syth. Ac yn ogystal, i bod nhw'n anwybyddu datganoli, oherwydd y maen nhw yn mynd nôl at ddeddf 1972 ac yn anwybyddu yn llwyr gorchymyn 2006 a baswyd gan y lle yma. A newch chi gysylltu ac arweinydd y cyngor hynny i ddweud wrtho fe i gyd yn ffurfio ac adroddiad yr archwilydd ac i dderbyn datganoli hefyd.
Mae'n bwysig i unrhyw awdurdod lleol i ystyried y gyfraith. Mae'n bwysig i unrhyw awdurdod lleol i ystyried unrhyw adroddiad sydd yn dod o'r archwilydd a nid meddwl bod hwnnw rhywbeth sydd gallu cael ei ddod i un ochr a dwi ddim yn credu dyle unrhyw awdurdod lleol fod yn y sefyllfa yna. Mae'n bwysig dros ben bod Sir Gar a Sir Benfro yn delio gyda'r sefyllfa ac wedyn ni yn gweithredu.
Question 5, Angela Burns.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Will the First Minister detail how outcomes are agreed and monitored with commissioners appointed by him?
Well, all commissioners operate independently of Welsh ministers in order to exercise their statutory functions. Each commissioner is required to report on their activities in an annual report which is laid before the Assembly.
Thank you for that. I absolutely agree with you that it's imperative that commissioners are able to be independent of government. However, a number of commissioners are on different levels of tenure, from 7 years down to 4. We have some appointed by Her Majesty the Queen, some by you, some by the Assembly. And it is very unclear as to how they can be truly held to account apart from an annual report that we may debate here. And I wondered, First Minister, if you would review how we might monitor them, because this is, after all, public money, they're performing a public service, and like all of us, they need to be totally accountable for that.
I can say to the member that we are considering whether it's timely now for a full independent review regarding the Children's Commissioner, following what the Commissioner himself has said. There is an anomaly, or anomalies, as the member has rightly pointed out. No decisions have been taken yet in terms of those appointments, but I refer, of course, to what I said about the Children's Commissioner. If the decision is to review the Children's Commissioner's roles and responsibilities, then in time the same will have to apply to the others as well.
Aled Roberts.
Prifynid os ydych chi yn cynnal adolygiad, gai ofyn i chi hefyd ystyried cyfrifoldebau y Comisiynydd ynglyn â plant. Ar hyn o bryd, mae'r system lle mae y Comisiynydd Plant yn Lloegr yn gyfrifol am materion sydd ddim wedi cael ei datganoli, yn rhywbeth mae Llywodraeth Prydain wedi methu a delio fo ers cryn dipyn o amser, a fes ni'n gofyn i chi ystyried hynny fel rhan o'r adolygiad.
Nid na beth o dewis ni, mae'n rhaid i weid ar y pryd, a mae fe'n anomaly. Yn barn ni yw y dyle Comisiynydd Plant Cymru fod yn yr un sefyllfa a Comisiynydd Plant Lloegr. Fe wnaethon ni hwnna'n glir ar y pryd, os gofiau. Ac wrth gwrs bydde hwnna'n rhywbeth, os bydde cefnogaeth y siambr ynglyn â wneud hwn, bydde ni'n balon i ystyried unwaith to gan Llywodraeth gyda Llywodraeth y Deyrnas Unedig.
Question 6, Keith Davies.
Diolch Llywydd. A wnaeth y Prif Weinidog ddatganiad ar ei fenioraethau ar gyfer cefnogi'r economi yng Nghymru.
Wedi cymryd camau pell gyrhaeddol i gyflawni'n blaenoriaethau ar gefnogi twf a swyddi canlyniadwy. Mae'r ffigurau diweddaraf ar gyfer y cyflogaeth, cynhyrchiad ac adeiladu yn dangos bod yr economi yng Nghymru yn adfer yn dda gyda chyflogaeth gyffredinol ar y lefel uchaf erioed.
Mae bod yn Ewrop, fel chi wedi sôn yn barod at Leanwyd, yn gyfrannu yn enfawr at yr economi yng Nghymru. Bron ni 2 biliwn o gyllid ranbarthol ers 2007, a wedi arwain at 3.7 biliwn o fuddsoddiad mewn economi Cymru, ac yn Sir Gar dros 12% o swyddi wedi cael ei creu gan gronfa datblygu ranbarthol Ewrop. Ydych chi'n cytuno fi bod e'n bwysig iawn bod Llywodraeth Cymru yn ymrwymedig i gadw Cymru fel partner gweithredol positif o fewn Ewrop?
Hynod o bwysig. Dim ond los gallu cael ei wneud i economi Cymru sy'n ni'n gadael yr Undeb Ewropeaidd. Colli mynediad, wrth gwrs, i un o'r marchnadoedd mwyaf yn y byd ar amser, wrth gwrs, lle mae'r economi yn tyfu, ond wrth gwrs ni'n gwybod bod pethau ddim mor gadarn ar y lefel Prydeinig a beth byddwn ni eisiau. Ond na, byddwn ni, fel ni wedi weid fel Llywodraeth, wastod yn wneud yr achos bod aelodaeth o'r Undeb Ewropeaidd yn rhywbeth holl bwysig i economi Cymru.
William Graham.
First Minister, you'll be aware of the comments by Emma Watkins, the Director of CBI Wales, concerning the M4 around Newport. The quality and reliability of infrastructure is of vital importance to business investment decisions in Wales. Is it a risk of losing out in the race for inward investment if the resilience of our major economic corridor is not improved. First Minister, how would you agree with this assessment, and how do you intend to alleviate the problem?
Indeed we do, and as the member will know, early access to borrowing powers granted to us by the UK government will enable us to put together a financial package to finance the improvements that are needed around the M4, particularly around the Brynglas tunnels. We see it, of course, as a necessary improvement that's needed to our busiest road.
Alan Fred Jones.
Economi yn ymweld â ffatri cwmni Siemens yn Llanberis y dynod o'r blaen. Mae'r ffatri'n cyflogi 450 o bobl ac yn gyflogwr pwysig iawn yn yr ardal. Rhyfedd iawn, mae o'r un ffigwr ar nifer o gwmnïau o'r Undeb Ewropeaidd sydd wedi sefydlu yma yng Nghymru ac yn cyflogi fel yr oedd Lianwd yn cyfeirio ato fo yn helaeth ac yn rhan hanfodol o'r economi. Ydych chi'n cytuno bod yr hethreg gwrth Ewropeaidd yma, mae'r Blaidoriaid a'r UKIP ac eraill yn rhan ohono fo yn peryglu dyfodol gweithwyr yma yng Nghymru os na fyddwn ni'n llwyddo i sicrhau canlyniad positif os bydd na referendum?
Ydw, mae'n rhaid i weid, achos ni'n gwybod bod yna lawer o gwmnïau sydd ddim ond yng Nghymru o achos y ffaith bod gyda nhw mynediad i'r farchnad Ewropeaidd. Os dyw'r mynediad ddim yna, neu os oes unrhyw fath o rwystyr ar y mynediad yna, felly bydd nhw ddim yn dod a bydd rai yn y pen draw yn gadael. Pam sefyll tu fas i'r Undeb Ewropeaidd, pam marchnad chi yn yr Undeb Ewropeaidd, ac wrth gwrs beth fydd yn digwydd wedyn ni yw byddwn nhw'n symud mewn i'r Undeb Ewropeaidd, se Prydain ddim yn rhan o'r farchnad hynny. Fe wys o'r blaen, mae aelodaeth ni o'r Undeb Ewropeaidd yn holl bwysig i ddyfodol ag economi Cymru.
Question 7, Rhyn ap Iorwerth.
Diolch, Llywydd. Aeth y Prif Weinidog ddatganiad am flaenoriaethau Llywodraeth Cymru ar gyfer y sector pysgota.
Ni wedi amlinellu ein blaenoriaethau ar gyfer y sector pysgota yn y cynllun gweithredu strategol ar gyfer môr a physgodfeydd Cymru a lawnsiwyd mis Tachwedd Llynedd.
Diolch yn fawr iawn. Thank you. You'll be aware of the real economic potential of increasing shellfish production in Wales, but the long-term viability of the industry is at risk because of the current 7-year licences being offered to fishermen, and licences in the past have been many decades long. Now, with temperatures from the beginning of next month in the Menai Strait starting to rise, now is the time to put down mussel seed, but the insecurity about the future is putting off investors. Will you act now to end delays within government in bringing in revised Menai fishing orders so we can plan for a prosperous and sustainable future for the industry?
I think the member is referring to the Menai West Several Order. I assume that's what he means. I can tell him that we are looking to reach a decision on the issues that are holding up the current Several Order application for Menai West before the end of this month.
Antoinette Sandbach.
First Minister, we've heard much about the impacts of storms on infrastructure, but of course the storms have meant that many of our fishermen have not been able to leave port in order to undertake that activity, to go fishing, and those problems are being replicated around the UK coast as this wave of storms hits. What consideration has your government made to looking at the impact on the fishing industry in Wales, and have you made any assessment of any damage to the fishing grounds, particularly in relation to shellfish here in Wales as a result of the storms?
Not as yet, but of course that would need to happen after the threat of major storms has gone, and sadly we're not in that position. A full assessment of any damage, whether it be to coastal defences or indeed to fishing grounds or indeed to the fishing industry, would have to be made once we can be reasonably sure that the current spate of extremely windy weather has disappeared. There will be no point doing it now, clearly, but there will come a time when that will need to be done.
Question 8, Russell George.
Will the First Minister make a statement on how the Welsh Government supports the Citizens Advice Bureau network in Paris?
Yes, in addition to the £2.2 million per annum funding for the Better Advice, Better Lives service delivered by Citizens Advice, around £1 million this year has been allocated to support frontline advice services all over Wales, and of course a proportion of this funding has gone to CABs, including the Powys CAB.
Thank you for your answer, First Minister. I don't need to document, I hope, the financial position that the CAB services in Powys is finding itself in due to the potential funding cuts from Powys County Council. I understand the requirements that the Council have to make in regards to savings, but I think cutting the CAB funding would be a short-term negative step. Powys, of course, has missed out on Communities First funding last year, one of only 3 authorities not to receive this funding, which was used by other local authorities to support their CAB services. Therefore, First Minister, can I ask, is there any additional Welsh Government support that you have identified at this stage that the CAB service in Powys may benefit from delivering government services, and what discussions have your officials had with Powys County Council and CAB to help mitigate this vital service in the future?
He's, I suppose, lobbying in his role as a councillor as well there, but nevertheless, I understand the point that he's making. But what we can't do is to plug the gaps that are there, unfortunately, because of local authority cuts, nor indeed through legal aid cuts, which, of course, are cuts imposed by the UK government. But we are, of course, keen to ensure that whatever funding we can make available is used where it is needed most in the most effective way possible. I can say, of course, that last May we published the Advice Services Review report, and that review made a number of recommendations in terms of advice providers being able to identify ways in which services can be provided in the future, even considering, of course, the difficult financial climate.
Joyce Watson.
Diolch, Clywyd. Every local authority we know is facing tough decisions, First Minister. But do you support my view that councils must prioritise and protect those services that help people who've been affected worst of all by the Tory cuts and their welfare reforms? And the fact is that CAB is a lifeline for people in financial trouble, for those affected by the bedroom tax and other cruel reforms by the Tory government. And Powys CAB is the only advice service covering the whole of Powys, and Powys Council must do all in their power to protect that.
I agree with what the member has said. It's important, of course, that the Council examines very carefully its budget, as I'm sure it does, whilst considering, of course, the need to make sure that proper advice is available within Powys in these difficult financial times for so many people.
Simon Thomas.
Diolch, Llywydd. Prifnidog yn I gyd yn gwybod, wrth gwrs, y gwaith clodfew iawn mae'r gwirfoddolwyr a gweithwyr CAB yn ei wneud ym Mhawys, ond gan fod ni'n sôn am toriad fan hyn sy'n arbed Cyngor Sir Powys 93,000 y flwyddyn, gawn ni edrych ar beth mae'r CAB yn llwyddo dod I mewn I Powys. 2.2 miliwn mewn bydd daliadau newydd oherwydd y cyngor sy'n cael ei roi gan CAB, 1.4 miliwn o dyledion wedi dileu oherwydd y cyngor maen wedi roi I pobl mewn dyled, ac 8 miliwn o dyledion wedi aildrefnu ac ailnogodi oherwydd y wybodaeth maen nhw'n roi I bobl mewn dyled. Dyna gwerth 10 miliwn o bunnoedd a mwy o fydd I economi Powys. Mae torri 90,000 yn pitw bach wrth gymharu hwnna. Mae rhaid I Powys ailystyried penderfyniad yma, a ydych chi'n cytuno â fi?
Wel, mae hwnna'n rhywbeth wrth gwrs I gyngor Powys, a mae'r cwestiwn hyn i'r cynghorwyr rhenni, ond dwi ddim yn anghytuno a beth y wedodd yr aelod ynglyn â'r werth mae CAB Powys yn cynrychioli, yn creu ynglyn â'r ymgynghori maen nhw'n rhoi I bobl sy'n byw ym Mhawys.
Kirsty Williams.
First Minister, the extraordinary thing about the actions of Powys County Council is that they're not seeking to make a reduction in funding to CAB. They're seeking to pull all the funding all together. You say that this is a matter for the Council, and you're correct, but as you've just outlined in previous answers, you as a Welsh Government give money to Powys CAB to deliver services on behalf of the Welsh Government. Should this decision go ahead, CAB offices in Powys will close and therefore will no longer be in a position to deliver the services which you have commissioned from them. Therefore, it is a matter for your government. And in that case, what will you do to ensure that the services that you want to see delivered and you've made funding available for will continue to be delivered in Powys should the Council take this decision to cut all funding rather than just look to reduce funding in these straitened times?
Well, these are matters, of course, ultimately for the Council. Nevertheless, we will work with and continue to work with the Independent Advice Providers Forum to ensure that advice is available. What we cannot do, unfortunately, is to fund direct, not to backfill cuts that are made by other authorities.
Question 9, Nick Ramsey.
That's the one. Will the First Minister outline what support his government are providing to the creative industries in Wales?
Yes, we've awarded over £8 million of funding to the sector since September 2011, creating over 500 new jobs.
Thank you, First Minister. As you should be aware, the CBI have called on the UK and Wales governments to, and I quote, build upon existing progress within creative industries with a coherent strategy. Now, given your recently announced proposals for a development bank, which contains, I must say, a striking similarity to some aspects of the Welsh Conservatives Invest Wales policy, can you tell us now what aspects of Welsh Conservative Destination Cymru policy your government is planning to nick to try and tilt the playing field more in favour of creative businesses' exports in Wales?
When it comes to taking policies from others, one of the things that struck us as particularly ironic was the fact that his party came up with this idea of aftercare for businesses in Wales, which bears a striking resemblance to the anchor companies and all that we're doing for them. So I don't think we need any lessons in terms of policy development from the party opposite, because they seem to take our policies. One of the things we won't do, of course, is to implement their cuts.
Bethan Jenkins.
Prif Weinidog, chydig o fisoedd yn ôl, nes I codi'r cwestiwn gyda chi fel Llywodraeth ynglyn â sut gall S4C ymwneud mwy gyda cwricwlwm mewn ysgolion a trafod materion fel gwefannau newyddion hyperlleol. A ydych chi fel Llywodraeth wedi cael unrhyw trafodaethau gyda S4C ynglyn â sut gallen nhw hybu mwy o bobl ifanc I ddefnyddio'r iaith Gymraeg tu allan yn y cymunedau, os bydde rhywbeth fel mwy o cydweithio gyda S4C yn ein ysgolion lleol?
Dwi yn bersonol ddim wedi cael unrhyw sgwrs ar hwnna, ond ysgrifennu i'r aelod gyda mwy o fanylion.
Thank you, First Minister.